Greetings, fellow bored people. I'm Ken the Metal Professor, host of the show Mostly Metal, which airs on WVLP 103.1 FM in Valparaiso, Indiana. Outside of town, where the gerbils don't crank up enough power to reach, you can catch us on WVLP.org. My show runs twice a week. Original airing Wednesday night, 10 p.m. U.S. Central. Follow-up replay Sunday night, 8 p.m. U.S. Central. Show is mostly heavy metal. In the last couple of months, during all this COVID business, while the studio is not doing broadcasts live from in the studio and we're pre-recording, I've been loading up with top 10 lists, and I've fallen into this pattern of every other week doing a metal, then a rock, then a metal band. So last week was Evergrey. This week is Jethro Tull. And next week will be Pain of Salvation, and then followed by the Doobie Brothers. And then after that, who knows? But again, Wednesday, June 10th at 10 p.m., you can listen to the whole show. And part of that show will be my top 10 favorite songs by Jethro Tull, which I'm going to go through soon. And also, you can hear some politically motivated tunage, like the Tiananmen Man by Nevermore, and new tracks by bands like MPMB and The Oracle. So what I'm going to do here is go through my preference ranking of Jethro Tull CDs, all in all, and then I'll rattle off my top 10 favorite songs. They have quite a discography, 20 albums altogether, studio albums. I'm not considering Living in the Past, any other collection that just has B-sides or rarities or whatever. I'm also not including the Jethro Tull Christmas album that came out in 2003. So these are kind of just the core 20 studio CDs. In my mind, they kind of come in sets, right? There's the really early set where they're very bluesy nightclub Jethro Tull, and then they had their kind of most progressive rock, okay, we'll call it that for a second, just the most experimentation they were doing where they really hit their stride. Then they got into their 80s zone, and we'll say some more about that. And then they kind of came back for a little bit, and there was a nice run of 3 albums after their MTV craze that kind of fit as a nice set. And then their most recent, other than the Christmas album, being jtull.com from 1999. So anyway, my list will start off very similar to others I've seen on YouTube, like Pete Pardo at Sea of Tranquility. If you haven't checked out his videos, go do that right away. Classic rock review. The gentleman from our friends in Great Britain, who sounds way smarter than I ever could, has also done Jethro Tull listing, and I think both of those guys started off almost the same way, with my least favorite Jethro Tull CD being Under Wraps from 1984. Really the only song I can even get into on this album is European Legacy. I suppose the title track, if it were to be redone with less 80s affectations and more just classic Jethro Tull sound, to me it sounded like it might fit in on the Stormwatch era kind of thing, but other than that, it doesn't really have a whole lot to recommend it. They were caught up in experimentation, I think, with synths and stuff like that, and getting caught up in the 80s, and it just didn't work. At number 9, their most recent all original song CD, jtull.com from 1999. And I guess it sounds like the bass player was having fun on this album. He's got a good groove going. There's a song on there called Hot Mango Flush, which is very dynamic, and I either love it or hate it, depending on what my mood is when I'm listening. I can't make up my mind whether I like it or not. The lead tracks, Spiral and AWOL, are pretty good, but again, it just sounds like they weren't that interested in what they were doing at the time. At number 18, I'll put This Was from 1968. That's their debut. This was, very much their bluesy nightclub Jethro Tull era. When I listen to music, sometimes I get a mental picture of the band, and when I get a mental picture of them playing the music in this song, it's on a small cramped stage with smoke everywhere around them, playing blues. My Sunday Feeling and Serenade to a Cuckoo are pretty decent. I mean, it's not a bad album, it's just not kind of the sound I hope to get from Jethro Tull. Okay, we're going to leap way forward. For number 17 is Rock Island from 1989. This is in that set of three that I was mentioning that kind of go together. After Crest of a Knave, right, in their big heavy metal heyday, they came back with Rock Island, Catfish Rising, and Roots to Branches. The Flute came back to prominence. These are three pretty good to great albums. Rock Island is my least favorite of the three. Heavy Water and Another Christmas Song are pretty good. At number 16 from 1973, Passion Play. I know that a lot of people really, really love Passion Play. I appreciate it. I don't successfully get through it. I have no memory of what the second half, side two is, because I just kind of fade out after a while. I think it's a little too inconsistent and too noodly. And so as much as I appreciate how much other people like it, I don't get into it. I guess to me it's kind of like several weeks ago I mentioned Generation 13 by Saga, which a lot of people really like. I don't get into it that much. I appreciate the idea of it and what they were trying to do, but as a listening experience, it just doesn't, to me, it's not one of my preferences. Number 15, Stand Up from 1969. A New Day, Yesterday, and Boré and Fat Man are all great tunes. I dig this a lot, although Ian Anderson sounds too much like Kermit the Frog for me to really get into it too much. Number 14, I'll put Crest of a Knave from 1987. Now, this, compared to other ranking lists that I've whittled through over the last several weeks, this one really surprised me in terms of where I thought things were going to end up when I went into it and where they finally ended up after I listened and re-listened and thought about it and compared. If you'd asked me a month ago, would I have put Crest of a Knave in the top 10 Jethro Tull albums, I would have said, yeah, sure, because I really liked it when it came out. But I haven't listened to it for a long time, and when I go back and listen now, I'm like, I think I was caught up in the moment when this came out. Steel Monkey's great, Farm on the Freeway is okay, Raising Steam is fine, but I don't like it as much as I used to, so I've got to put it farther down the list. I was reading that some people were saying, wow, listen to Jethro Tull trying to be Dire Straits, with Money for Nothing being a big hit back then, and Jethro Tull trying to sweep in on their coattails. You wouldn't think Jethro Tull would have to do that, but if you go back and listen to Raising Steam with the way the guitars sound and are produced and the way Ian Anderson sings that, I don't know how you could say they weren't trying to sound like Dire Straits. Okay, at number 13, Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die from 1976. The title track, Craze Institution are good songs. This might be higher. It comes from the right era of Jethro Tull, but it's one of these albums that I listen to, and I've listened to it a lot, and yet when I go back and look at the track listing, I can't tell you which songs, what the titles link to in terms of music. They don't stick in my head very much, even though, a lot of times the title of a song will immediately trigger the sound of the chorus, and then you know what song it is. And on this album, I can't do that to this day. It just doesn't stick with me. Okay, number 12 is my middle favorite of those three that came out after Crest of a Knave. So Catfish Rising from 1991. It's better than Rock Island, but it's not as good as Roots to Branches for me. Roll Your Own and When Jesus Came to Play are fun. I think it's more fun than Rock Island was, but it's inconsistent in terms of how much I like the songs. At number 11, I'll put A from 1980, Filingdale Flyer and Black Sunday and the instrumental Pine Martin's Jig. These are all great tunes. This was one of the first Tull albums I owned. It took me a while to get into it, and it's one of those where I think I developed a liking for it, but then as I compare it to the rest of the discography now, it kind of goes back down in my appreciation of it. It's very late 70s, early 80s influenced, especially the cover. So it's, I enjoyed it at the time, and I still like it some, but it's not in the top 10. Now we're getting to the top 10. At number 10, I will put Broadsword and the Beast from 1982. Any album with flying colors and slow marching band, those are great songs. That has to be in my top 10. At number 9, I'm going to put Benefit from 1970. This is their third album where Ian Anderson finally loses his Kermit the Frog voice, so that makes me appreciate it a lot more. And it's got great songs on it. Nothing to Say, to Cry You a Song, and particularly Inside, which almost made my top 10. Number 8, War Child from 1974. A lot of these I think of as side 1 and side 2. I like the second side of this a lot more. But Skating Away on the Thin Ice of a New Day is a great tune. The third, Hurrah, and Rainbow Blues are all good. It's in that the Jethro Tull zone of the Jethro Tull albums. It's not as good as some of the ones that surround it. At number 7, I'll put Minstrel in the Gallery from 1975. Baker Street Muse at 16 and a half minutes long, I think is the longest song that they've done. I mean, not including Passion Play or Thick as a Brick, but the title track and One White Duck, I love the vibe that this sets up. I mean, the title is Minstrel in the Gallery, and I can, if you go back to that, what do you envision happening? I can picture myself sitting in an opera box watching them play this tune these songs down on the stage. Okay, number 6, let's go back to those 3 post Crest of a Knave albums, Roots to Branches. When I talk about how much different this list is now when I finished it as it was when I started it, this really surprises me. So back in the day, Crest of a Knave to me was great. I was a teenager in the 80s. I was in high school when this came out. Jethro Tull was the bomb, and Crest of a Knave was awesome. And now when I listen to it, I'm like, okay, I was young. I also didn't like the 3 follow-ups nearly as much. In fact, at one point I traded all 3 of them away and I quit following Jethro Tull because I was like, oh, this stuff isn't as good as Crest of a Knave. I'm not interested anymore. But I've recovered them, and when I go back and listen again, Roots to Branches is a damn good album. Wounded Old and Treacherous and Another Harry's Bar are great tunes. I like the sound of it all the way through. The flute just kicks ass. I mean, they really ate their Wheaties on this album, and I like it a lot, and more so than I thought I would. At number 5, Thick as a Brick from 1972. This one, I like the front end of it a little bit more than the back end of it. It does have memorable parts to it, and I do enjoy listening to it a lot. That's why it's this far up in the list. But still, when I think about what I want from Jethro Tull, and I know I'm not supposed to base ratings on or rankings on what I wish something was compared to what it really is, I'm not supposed to do that, and I don't like to do that. But when I think in my head, okay, I want to listen to some Jethro Tull, I want to listen to songs Jethro Tull, not long 20-minute opuses Jethro Tull. And Thick as a Brick has enough breakpoints in it to keep it dynamic enough that it works out that way. But the reason it's not higher than number 5 is because of that. At number 4, Stormwatch from 1979, definitely the best album cover of Jethro Tull for me. I love looking at that thing. But Something's on the Move is a track that almost made my top 10. North Sea Oil has been one of my favorite Tull songs for a long time. Although it's not in my top 10, go figure. Dun Ringgill, just really, really good stuff. To me, that's one of the definitive Jethro Tull albums. If anybody asked me, okay, what does Jethro Tull sound like, I would say, okay, listen to this. If you can get into this, then there's hope that you'll like other Jethro Tull. If you don't like this, then you're probably not going to like anything else. Number 3, Heavy Horses from 1978. Acres Wild and No Lullaby and One Brown Mouse. I mean, I can just listen to this album all day. Number 2, Songs from the Wood from 1977. Whistler, Cup of Wonder, Velvet Green, Jack in the Green. I don't know what the deal was with green, but the title track. I mean, can you imagine being aware of these guys? I'm not old enough to have been listening to Jethro Tull when these albums were coming out. I mean, I was old enough, but I would have been in my early teens, if that. But just, I mean, imagine, Songs from the Wood and Heavy Horses and Stormwatch and, Minstrel in the Gallery right before that. Well, 2 albums before that. I mean, that band of albums is just so spectacular. I guess it would have been great because they were on fire. They had one album a year from when they started with This Was in 1968 until finally after A in 1980. There they took a break for 2 years before their next album, but they were having an album out every single year for over a decade, and just I wish I had been aware of them, and I really would have had a good time picking those things up right away and digging into them. It would have been great. But yeah, Songs from the Wood, I can just imagine sitting around a campfire listening to them play those songs, like the picture on the cover. And then number 1, Aqualung from 1971, my favorite Jethro Tull album. The title track, Cross-Eyed Mary, Locomotive Breath, Wondering Aloud. In a strange way, one of the reasons I like the album so much is that it affects me in a strange way that I appreciate, that it makes me feel that way, even though I don't know that I like feeling that way. I listen to Aqualung and I feel dirty, right? I mean, the album cover makes me feel dirty. The lyrics in the title track make me feel dirty. I feel a little dirtier when I'm done listening to it. But when music can do that to you, I think that's terrific. And the songs themselves are just great. So it's a very effective album, both musically and emotionally, I guess. So that's my favorite. How much time? Oh boy, I'm already at 15 minutes. So I got to make a couple of edits here. It's going to bring it down to 13 minutes. Should I make yeah, you know what? I'll pause this and I'll keep my top 10 list in the same video. I'll just go through it pretty quickly. Okay. Gotta wet my whistle after all that. It's a long discography. A lot of people that do these videos will be seated in front of their CD collection. I'm in front of most of my comics back here. Trade paperbacks and loose issues that I have in open boxes, not necessarily long boxes, not my CDs. That's because a long time ago I decided to start keeping my CDs out of their jewel cases to save space. So, for example, this is Jethro Tull. Right, this doesn't look impressive on a shelf, but this is all 20. So I've got a couple of their collections that you can get all the way up to jtull.com, but not in the jewel case. So 20 CDs in that. So I've got a lot of them, and I guess I could sit in front of them, but it just doesn't look impressive. So my top 10 favorite Jethro Tull songs as played on Mostly Metal this week: Wednesday night at 10. Sunday night at 8, WVLP.org, coming from Valparaiso, Indiana. Some honorable mentions: Something's on the Move, Slow Marching Band from Stormwatch and Broadsword and the Beast, Filingdale Flyer from A. These were so close, but they didn't quite make it. And at number 10, I'm going to put Boré from Stand Up, because it's a great tune. I wanted to have their instrumentals represented somewhere in my top 10 list, and that's my favorite of their instrumentals. It's a very happy song, and so I'm glad to put it at number 10. At number 9, remember I was saying how Roots to Branches surprised me as how much I like it as compared to a lot of the others when I really sat down and started thinking about it. Wounded, Old, and Treacherous. This is, again, Roots to Branches from 1995. This is a 7.5 minute song. It's got a lot of swagger to it. I love the way it builds up slowly, and then it hits, and it kind of goes back to slow again, and then the second half of the song is just pretty intense. And I think the vibe of this song, it would have fit nicely on some of their older albums from their heyday in the 70s as well. At number 8, No Lullaby off of Heavy Horses, structured very much like Wounded, Old, and Treacherous, another 7.5 minute long song. Starts off a little bit lighter, but then hits you in the face. Nice organ building into the song, especially later on. It gets up to this urgent driving beat in the second half, especially when the lyrics start going on about thrust and parry. It's good. It's good driving music, and I don't necessarily think of Jethro Tull as car driving music, but this song definitely is. Number 7 from War Child in 1974, Skating Away on the Thin Ice of a New Day. When I mentioned that I could listen to songs from the wood and imagine sitting around a campfire having these songs played for me, the guitar work in Skating Away on the Thin Ice of a New Day does the same thing for me. Even though it's not on Songs from the Wood, I can imagine sitting around a campfire having Martin and Ian doing this song for me. It would be awesome. Number 6, Cup of Wonder off of Songs from the Wood, 1977. The flute line in this song is just great. It's very upbeat. Flying Colors off of Broadsword and the Beast from 82 at number 5. Now this is definitely leaning into the 80s affectations with some synths, but it's got a great drive and melody. It almost sounds like a theme song at times that Mike Post could have written, but I mean that in a good way. It's a catchy tune. Number 4, Locomotive Breath from Aqualung in 1971. This could be one of their heaviest tunes just the chugging that goes along is awesome. At number 3, I'm going to say Thick as a Brick, but I'm really talking about the opening 5-minute segment of it. If you look on the album, it's just Thick as a Brick Part 1 and 2. When you go to online sources like Spotify, you actually see the tracks broken down with individual titles. So really don't mind, and See There a Son is Born joined together as the opening track off of Thick as a Brick comes in at number 3. But if you want me to say Thick as a Brick, the whole thing, fine, but that first part is representative, and that first 5 minutes is what I put into the show because I couldn't play all 40 minutes in my show as one song. But the musical themes that get set up in that part of the album and then get repeated a few times later on are just terrific. At number 2, Black Sunday off of A from 1980. The chorus of this song is great, and then the way that the chorus melody line gets echoed back in the guitar solo at the end of the song just gives me happiness, gives me chills. I wouldn't have thought that a song off of A would be one of my top 3 favorite songs by Jethro Tull, but what do you know? I love the tune. And then number 1 is the title track from Aqualung 1971. Like I said before, I don't know that I should like feeling dirty from listening to the song, but I do, and if music can affect me that way, that's a point in its favor. Well, here comes Zoe. She wants to talk about Jethro Tull. Hi, Zoe. One of the things I really like about this tune is the guitar solo at the end of the song. Reminds me a lot, let me see this carefully, maybe it doesn't remind me musically, but it makes me think about the way guitar solos introduce into a song by bands like Molly Hatchet or The Outlaws or Blackfoot, where there's been, the verse, chorus, a little bit before that, and then there's this little pause in the music while it builds up, and then the guitar solo just sweeps away and goes and goes and goes. Fall of the Peacemakers by Molly Hatchet, Highway Song by Blackfoot. Now, Jethro Tull is not Southern rock, right? That's why I want to be careful to say it doesn't remind me of it musically, but it makes me think of it. That kind of structure, I love that. And that happens in Aqualung, which is one of the reasons I like it so much. So, 20 minutes on Jethro Tull. Thanks for watching. If you get a chance and you want to listen to these songs, find me on WVLP. And next week, my top 10 favorite songs by Pain of Salvation, along with my preference ranking of their albums too, and then the Doobie Brothers the week after that.